Solving multi-step inequalities. This first section is your warm-up. So looking at your warm-up, you should have solved each of these equations if it's possible. And if the equation makes something that's equal, so like -3 equals -3, then it makes it the identity. If you can solve it for a variable and you get c equals a number, that's the solution. If you get something that is untrue, like -3 equals 6, that is no solution. So let's go look at the first two problems. In this case, you should use the distributive property, which means that I'm going to take 3 times c to give me 3c, 3 times 4, which is 12, and I have that equal to 6. It's a two-step problem, so I'm going to undo the plus 12 by subtracting 12 on both sides. Everybody should be writing this down with the work. 3c equals -6. Since it's 3 times c, I'm going to divide by 3. C equals -2. And you can check it to make sure that that makes sense by plugging that in. Looking over at number 2, again, get rid of the parentheses because I'm using the distributive property. So 3t plus 6 is equal to 3t minus 6. In this case, I'm going to get the variables on just one side. So I'm going to subtract 3t on both sides. And what ends up happening here is I get positive 6 equals -6. That is not true. Therefore, this has no solution. Make sure you've written both of those solutions down with work. Moving on to number 3. Again, you have variables on both sides. So I'm going to move the smallest variable, 2p. It's a positive 2p, so I'm going to subtract 2p on both sides. Notice that I put the p's underneath each other. 5p minus 2p gives me 3p. The plus 9 comes down. 2p minus 2p is 0. The -1 is still there. And now I have a two-step equation again. Subtract 9 on both sides. 3p equals -10. It's 3 times p, so I'm going to divide. P equals -10/3. You could write it as the same thing as -3 1/3 or -3.3 repeating. Both are the same. Number 4, use the distributive property again and combine like terms. I'm going to put two things happening at the same time. -5n and positive 7n. When I combine that, I get 2n plus 4. On the right side, I'm going to use that distributive property. So 2 times n is 2n, plus 2 times 2 is 4. Now at this point, I see I've got 2n plus 4 on the left side, 2n plus 4 on the right side. Those are the same thing. Therefore, this is the identity. If you were going to subtract 2n, you would get 4 equals 4, which is also true. When I look at number 5, I can see that I have fractions. And so I'm going to combine the terms that I can, 1/2 k and 1k. That is going to give me 1.5 k, or I can look at this as 2/2. That's equal to 1. And that would end up being 3/2 k minus 2/3 is equal to 7/6. It may be beneficial to change all of these to the same denominator, but we're going to just start by adding 2/3 to both sides. So I have 3/2 k is equal to 7/6 plus 2/3. Now 2/3 is the same thing as 4/6. I get that because I can multiply the 2 by 2 and the 3 by 2 to get 4/6. So now I'm going to add 7/6 plus the 4/6 This is what I'm really adding. And that is going to give me 11/6. Then the next step is, how do I get rid of this fraction? Since I'm multiplying by 3/2, we've talked about how the only way to get rid of fractions that we know at this point is to multiply by its reciprocal, which is the flip. So I'm going to multiply that. That's going to take care of the coefficient of k, so k is just by itself, so 1k. Now I'm going to multiply the top, 11 times 2, which gives me 22, and 6 times 3 is 18. I need to reduce that, so I end up with 1 and 4/18 left, and I can rewrite that even in a simpler form, so it becomes 1 and 2/9. Number 6, start with variables on both sides, subtract 2t, -32 equals 3t plus 1. Again, I have a two-step equation at this point, subtracting 1. 3t is equal to -33. Divide by 3. T equals -11. Okay, and we're going to go back and look at the last two problems. The perimeter problems. In this case, the perimeter, just so you know, is length plus this, plus the length, plus 15, all added together, and that's going to give us this perimeter. So 2L, because there are two of them here, plus 15 plus 15 is 30. That is going to equal 110. Again, when I solve this, it's a two-step problem. Subtract 30. 2L equals 80. Divide by 2. L equals 40. So the missing length here is 40. Looking at number 8, W and W, 26 and 26. So 2W plus 26 times 2 is 52 is equal to 78. Subtract 52 on both sides. So I end up with 2W is equal to 26. Divide by 2. And we're going to find out that W is equal to 13. And again, you can check to make sure that that makes sense in your problem. That should be your warm-up. Make sure that it is dated. And here are your notes for today. So your notes, you can label those notes lesson 4-4. And you can add these to the warm-up if you would like. These will be extra credit in your next binder check, which will be coming to you at the end of this week. So looking at solving our inequalities, it's the same thing that we did for our warm-up, except now you just have the inequality sign. Remember, you do have to keep this in mind. If I multiply or divide by a negative, what do I have to do? You should be thinking to yourself or going back to your previous notes, and you find out that if you multiply or divide by a negative number, you flip the inequality sign. So you flip the inequality sign. So let's look at letter A. It's still a two-step inequality. We are going to add 4 on both sides, as our goal is to isolate that variable. So I end up with -3x. I didn't multiply or divide, so that means that my sign stays the same. 14 plus 4 gives me 18. Now, the next step, I've got negative 3 times x, so I'm going to divide by a negative 3 on both sides. When I divide by a negative, I automatically flip the sign. I'm left with x on the left side. 18 divided by negative 3 gives me negative 6. To check your solution, you plug negative 6 in. A negative 3 times negative 6 gives us 18. And 18 minus 4 is 14. And 14 is less than or equal to 14. I can also check anything smaller than negative 6. For example, negative 7, negative 8. Looking at letter B, working with the variable, and we're going to work on that side first, I need to isolate that t. So that means I need to get rid of the b. In order to do that, or get rid of the 7, excuse me. In order to do that, it is a positive 7, so I'm going to subtract 7 on both sides. Now by subtracting, I don't flip the sign. The next thing I'm going to do is negative 2 times t. The opposite of multiplying is to divide both sides by negative 2. I end up with negative 1. I do need to flip the sign, and positive t. So negative 1 is greater than t. This one gets to be a little bit more complicated. This is the example in your book. So you're going to want to check your book. It is on page 220. You don't need to read it here. If you open your books to page 220, you're going to find this example that talks about the length and the width of a rectangular banner. And they want the length or the trim to be less than or equal to 48. It can be no more than 48 inches of trim. So as they set that up, they know that the perimeter is 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. And that has to be less than or equal to 48. And they solve that here for you. So in our example, our problem, we are going to look at a second banner. Again, you can draw a picture when it comes to word problems that may help you. The trim is what goes along the outside. So it's like the perimeter of our rectangle. We have a length of 12 feet. We know that it's 12 feet long, but we don't know the width. We do have 40 feet of our trim. So what that's telling us is the perimeter equals 40. We can't use any more than 40 feet of trim, so when we set this up, we're going to have 2w, because we're going to add each of the w's up, so w plus w is 2w. Adding the 12 plus the 12 gives us 24. We need that to be smaller or equal to 40 feet of trim. 40 is the highest amount that we could have around our second banner. Then we set this up to solve it. So we're going to subtract 24 on both sides. 2w is less than or equal to 16. Divide both sides by 2. So we end up with w is less than or equal to 8. We don't flip the sign because we didn't multiply or divide by a negative. So our width for our second banner can be anywhere from 8 or lower. Now we get to some inequalities that involve parentheses using the distributive property. 4p plus 2 times p and 2 times 7. 2p plus 14 is less than 8. Now I'm going to combine like terms. 4p and 2p gives me 6p plus 14 is less than 8. And I'm down to my two-step equation. That means that I'm going to start by subtracting 14. So 6p is less than negative 6. Divide each side by 6. Because I'm not dividing both sides by a negative, I do not flip the sign. So p is less than negative 1. Do the same thing for letter B. Use the distributive property. Be careful here now because you're using that negative 2 as you're distributing. So 15 is less than or equal to 5 minus negative 2 times 4m gives us negative 8m. And negative 2 times negative 7 gives us negative 14. Now I'm going to combine the terms that are the same. In this case, the 5 and the minus 14 on the right side are the same. So 15 is less than or equal to negative 8m minus 9. Now I'm at that two-step inequality, which means I'm going to add 9 to both sides. 24 is less than or equal to negative 8m. And I'm going to divide by negative 8m. Again, dividing by that negative flips the sign. So keep those rules in mind as you are working towards solving these problems.